Good afternoon and welcome to the UK column viewers, wherever you are in the world. Now, we have a special guest today. It's a lady that I last spoke to, I think a little bit over a year ago. And we had a very interesting conversation about all matters to do with what was happening in the world. Quite a bit on alternative media, a little bit on what was happening in the world at the time, a bit on the BBC and a few other things. And I'm delighted that I've got Jemma Cooper with me today, and we are going to have an interview. Now, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be interviewing her or Gemma's going to be interviewing me. We'll see how this one pans out. But Jemma, welcome to UK Column Studios.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I've been such a fan for such a long time, subscriber to the channel, and it's a real honour. So thank you very much.
Good. Well, it's great that you finally made it down here. Now, I think I'm allowed to say to you, tell us a bit about yourself, because you've got a very interesting background. I'm going to say you were professional, you were very much in mainstream, and then something happened in your life, and now sometime later you're a new person. So where did you start off?
That's a very good way of putting it, actually, that I'm a new person, because I feel more that I'm the person I was always meant to be, actually. I felt much more authentic than I have done in a long time in the last few years. But yeah, I was a BBC journalist, presenter, producer for quite some time. I was in the BBC for 21 years. Before that, I was a newspaper journalist on a big regional daily paper with a big circulation before the days of the internet. So when newspapers really did have validity, that's how you got your info. So I was really well trained by a bunch of grizzly old hacks in the northeast of England in journalism. And I was there for 5 years, and then I was headhunted by the BBC in the north, and then I moved back to the West Country and was working at BBC Bristol for 21 years until, drum roll, 2020, when everything happened. And I'd had a foot in the alternative world for quite some time, because I'd had a it was a very profound spiritual awakening in 2011, 2012. And that had led me to going to alternative conferences and hearing people talk about the very events that were happening in 2020. And back in 2012, I was thinking, this all sounds a bit far-fetched. This all sounds a bit dystopian, not in my lifetime, surely not. And then it happened, and I thought, God, I've been hearing about this in the alternative world. So suddenly I had two journalistic heads on: one, seeing what the mainstream media was saying, and two, knowing what the alternative world and authors and conference speakers had been saying, and thinking, oh God, is this it? And the more I watched the mainstream and the BBC, especially looking at it from within, I thought, God, this is it. This is this thing that's been brewing. And I went on some anti-lockdown marches because I wanted to find out what was really going on, and I wanted to hear speakers. The BBC found out about it. As a member of staff, you're not supposed to go on any protests at all. So they very quickly suspended me, much quicker than they seem to have suspended another member of BBC staff that's currently in the headlines.
Currently got some problems.
Got a few issues of their own. I was suspended very quickly. But at that point, I just had decided to leave because I couldn't reconcile what I was being asked to do in my professional life with what I truly felt inside was happening. And I saw the lack of journalism within this major broadcast, and not just in the BBC, obviously it was the whole of the mainstream, but I thought that's not how I was trained. If I'd have gone to my old news editor with a story with one side, with no other thing, he would have kicked me out and said, come back when you've got a proper story, girl. There was no journalism going on whatsoever. And I thought, what's the expression? Cognitive dissonance. The person I was on the inside and what I was being asked to do on the outside just didn't match at all. So I was suspended, and they wanted to kind of discipline me and ask me a lot of questions. And some of those questions were quite near the knuckle. Do you share the opinions of these people at these protests? You're seen applauding. And I'm not on social media. I didn't put anything out. I did it in my private, personal time. Didn't do it in work time. But while I was suspended, some of my BBC colleagues in the newsroom where I worked in Bristol were so disgusted with my actions that they went to the tabloid press in an attempt to smear me, destroy my reputation, make me out to be a super spreader, a not very nice person, so that I made people cry in the office by questioning whether this was a real thing or not. So it was a very, very difficult time for me. And what was
Sorry, Jemma, was it lockdown that was the actual final trigger for you? What was the key bit that took you to the point where you knew you had to do something different or you had to move on?
I think probably lockdown was big for me because of the reality of the anti-lockdown marches and how quickly they grew, and the cross-section of people who, as we all know, the people that you never thought you'd see on a protest, these nice middle-class, Middle England people just going, this is something not right about this. And the swathe of people that represented England and Britain within the protest weren't being represented on the national broadcaster. And, you know, I know the BBC has a policy that they wouldn't cover protests because they say it encourages people to go to them, which I don't agree with. They will only cover the impact of a protest. So if you close roads and it causes lots of disruption. But I thought, no, it's an attempt to manipulate reality and what the licence fee payers are actually feeling.
Right.
These are people that pay the BBC's wages. So I thought the BBC had more of a duty to report on them.
You've given me something very interesting there, because we UK column team went up to the bigger London march, and how many people were there? Well, there's still discussion about that, but was it 500,000 or 750,000? Let's say it was 500,000 people. I could believe that. And the BBC didn't report it, so I contacted, first of all, the BBC press office and asked why, and I didn't get a proper answer. And then I sent an email to Tim Davie himself, and to my astonishment, I did get a reply. And,
wow.
And he just said, well, you know, we choose on any particular day what we're going to be reporting on the BBC, and on that particular day, you know,
we chose not to.
We chose not to report 500,000 people on the streets of
well, I mean, in a way, it was a gift because it backfired, didn't it? Because so many people were like, hang on, I was there and I saw the reality of it. Why isn't the BBC? I think a lot of people at that point still were relying on the BBC. Not everybody was full on into there's something really awful going on. People were just opposing lockdown. But when they saw that it just wasn't being reflected, people were like, hang on a minute, why? So it was questions upon questions for lots of people. Yeah. So the BBC really didn't do itself any favours. If it just reported a couple of them, maybe people wouldn't have been so vociferous in their criticism then of the BBC. Yeah. So it kind of was like a domino effect of questioning everything from that point for so many people.
Yeah, which is part of the good outcome of lockdown, because the lockdown was a brilliant time for the UK column, because a lot of new people started to come to us and say, we're looking at what you're reporting, and they got interested. So we saw a big surge in new viewers to the UK column, thanks to lockdown. We wouldn't wish lockdown, obviously, on people in UK or anywhere else, but for us, it was a really good point. And we've kept those people, and now we can say we're seeing more and more professional people locking on and listening to what we're talking about. Plus, we've had our MPs. We've had Sir Christopher Chope join us, and we've had Andrew Bridgen recently, who's going to come back to us, talk to us. And this, together with the medical professionals that have come forward, tells you that you are achieving something.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you've just hit the nail on the head. It's the amount of professional people that are questioning and won't stop questioning. I mean, I risked everything, you know, walking away from the BBC. It was all I'd ever known. I never got married and had kids. My career was everything to me till that point. But Andrew Bridgen risked everything. But once you have that understanding of the world isn't what we think it is, you can't go back. You can't pretend. No. So, you know, we're slowly galvanizing. And like you say, we had a conversation a year ago where we were at another meeting of people who think very much like us, and the timing wasn't quite right. But there are more and more groups like that now everywhere, just slowly galvanizing in this cross-section of society that is just like, we're not having this. It's you know, in a way, it's massively encouraging. And I think I did the right thing, difficult though it was. I did the right thing for me.
You did. You definitely did. Because otherwise you'd still be buried in the BBC, and you probably would be feeling sad. You'd be feeling depressed because you'd be locked in that system, wouldn't you?
Well, as somebody said to me, Jem, we could see it in you. Your soul was going to shrivel up and die within the next year.
Because you're not being truthful to yourself. And I think that gets a lot of people in a lot of jobs. Maybe in the NHS, they know that what they're now involved in isn't right, but they haven't got the courage to make the jump, and so they're not being honest to themselves. And I think that can pull a lot of people down.
Oh, I think not being true to yourself is one of the most depressing and distressing places to be, because if you're not living an authentic life, what kind of life are you living? If you're lying to yourself, it's the ultimate lie, really. And to stay somewhere for money, I get it. I was scared when I left, and I had to work. But then there are things that are more important than money, and now you've only got one life in this incarnation, and being true to yourself. And it was funny, after I took that first step, and I think this might have happened for other people that have left professions, I took the first step in stepping into my power and thinking, I can't do this, I cannot be in this organisation. But then the universe, whatever you want to call it, a higher force, a higher power, then said, right, okay, you've taken the first step, and I'm going to help you take the second and the third and the fourth. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then, lo and behold, doors started opening in other avenues, and then I met you, and actually it's been okay, and it's fortune favours the brave.
I think that's true. And what's interesting about where we've got to in this conversation, and I'm going to say to our audience, completely unscripted. So Jemma arrived by taxi 20 minutes ago, and we just a little bit of organising, but we haven't discussed what we were going to discuss. So we're sitting here. This is all absolutely off the cuff. But where have you got to? You've got to the point that you think that out there a lot of people are starting to do things, and I think that as well. But we get a lot of people who email us, and they'll say, we see what's going on, but we can't really do anything, and we're getting a bit down and a bit depressed. And I usually go back and I'm saying, well, we see a different picture, we being UK Column, because we've got a lot of people contacting us. And what we see is that more and more people are beginning to do something. It might be something really simple. They might send an email. They might decide to go to a mini protest, stand in the park or one of those things. So relatively simple thing to do. But they always say, once we did it, we felt better. And I think this is so important that if you're one of the UK Column viewers, or you're viewers of other media channels, and you're thinking that this thing's pulling you down, then the first thing to do is to do something, however small. Say no, talk in the Tesco queue, but also try and get somebody else to join you, because there's strength in numbers. And if there's 2 of you or 3 of you, doesn't need to be 30, 2 or 3, then you get a lot more confidence and you can do things. So I believe that although we can see things sort of getting bad and tending to close in, there's a lot of people who are now starting to wake up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not a fan of the phrase the Great Awakening, because that implies one big amorphous event that everybody will do at the same time. But it's there are a lot of awakenings, aren't there? So a lot of people that woke up through politics and seeing that, what the government was saying, or just knowing that politically, I mean, if you want to wake up to the fact that politicians are corrupt, but a lot of people, it's political. A lot of people woke up for the last few years because of the health side of things and big pharma. A lot of people woke up through lockdown. But I had my awakening. It was definitely a very profound personal spiritual awakening. It came through yoga and meditation way back in 2011. So I had a lot of quote unquote paranormal experiences, which led me to believe we're so much more than just this, that there is a whole other reality. And my yoga teacher was very good at explaining what was going on with me at the time, and that it was something to be welcome, not scared of. And that was my awakening. But what is definitely true is that there is an awakening of sorts. And however you come to it, whichever your kind of way in is, the end result is the same. And that's you get on this kind of energetic stream, and you can recognize like-minded people, and you do strike up conversations. We were talking earlier, you struck up a conversation with the guy you bought your lunch from, completely off the cuff, unexpected. So you begin, and you drop a layer of kind of pretense. There's no small talk. It's like we're all we're all vibrating on this kind of same frequency of seeing the world in a different way. And once you do, you can't go back.
No, absolutely, you can't go back. I reflect on where I was. When did I leave? I left the Navy in 93. So I'm going to say for that 21 years of my life up till 1993, I was absolutely in the system. In the military, you believe in the job. You're not going to last long if you don't do that. You believe in the job. It's a lot more enjoyable than I think a lot of people think it is. Certainly it was in those days in the Navy. You believe in your country. You believe there's a justice system. You believe there is a democracy operating. You believe that the NHS is providing good health care to everybody. And you believe that the bad guys deserve to be locked up in prison. That was my rough mentality. And then some interesting things begin to happen and I begin to learn. And now, when I look back, if you'd have said to me then, 1991, 92, in 2023, you're going to be doing this, I would have been stunned. I would have been absolutely stunned. And I wouldn't have it any other way because of what I've learned over that time. And the key bit for me, because we did talk about this a little while ago, but one of the key things that made a difference for me was going to visit somebody in prison. You have this view that the bad guys deserve to be locked up in prison. But when you go in a high security prison for the first time, that made a huge difference to how I saw the world, how I saw the people who were in prison. And I've got to say, as the years have gone by, I've been into quite a few prisons to visit people. And I have a completely different view on what the system is and what it thinks it's doing and what it's actually doing, because it's oppressing people. So that's one of the key bits for me.
See, that's an unusual avenue as well. You know, you had an awakening of sorts by going into prison. You know, you don't know how people are being triggered or affected or what it is that just makes people go. And this is happening. It is happening within tremendous speed now. This event in human consciousness, this development in human consciousness. Some people, it might be out, they might be walking their dog one day and they just see something or hear something and they have that moment. And I've said to somebody, what is it when you wake up? You know, what is it? And she explained it really well. It's somebody I work with now at the World Council for Health. She said, Jemma, it's just that moment where your soul and your conscience kick in. They kick in and they override the ego. And it's for that split second that they kick in and override the ego, and you perceive the world a different way because you're seeing it through your soul, not through the ego. She said that's the bit where the magic starts to happen. And that for some people could be having a baby, it could be falling in love, I don't know, but you just have that moment where you shift your perception and you see things much more clearly. And for you, it was obviously prison.
Well, it was that and the issue of children, because the first major event was a lady called Linda who came to see me, and I won't do the story because it's too long, but the essence of it is a lady calls me and said that her young daughter was stolen at gunpoint. A daughter of 11 years old, 10 or 11, was stolen at gunpoint by Neath Port Talbot Social Services in America. And that was such an incredible telephone call. I can still remember sort of where I was when I took that call. And I listened to what she had to say, and I thinking this is unbelievable. And then she said, I'll come and see you and I'll bring all the documents. And so Linda arrived down in Plymouth with a wheelie suitcase, and that suitcase was full of all the court documents. And I spent, I think it was 3 days, it might have been longer, and we went through the documents. And at the end of that time, I realised the story she was telling me was absolutely true. And what happened next was that I gave a talk about what had happened to her because she found it too difficult to talk to a public audience. It was too personal, it was too emotional. And I did that for her, and that was put out. And then Ian Crane asked if I would do a talk about something at AV2 in Bristol. I can't remember when that was, 2000. something.
Yeah.
And I did that, and the topic I chose was child stealing by the state. And my life has never been the same, because that was the trigger for people emailing and phoning me, all with these incredible stories about what had happened to their children. And so a journey of going through some pretty tough prisons to talk to people, why they were there and how they were finding it, but also mainly mothers, some dads talking about what had happened with their children.
But isn't it funny? It's like, sorry to interrupt, but the life you had before was so mainstream.
Yeah.
So you're in the forces. That you're taught to obey orders. You're not taught to question anything, are you?
Might have been this might have been a small problem for me, because one of the jokes I can tell on that is that when people asked you your opinion, I mistakenly thought that they wanted your opinion. They wanted your professional opinion, when of course they didn't. What they wanted was to be told what they wanted to hear. And I now realise that one of the things I got badly wrong was that when I was asked something, I gave an answer, which was always truthful, but I hope I had a bit of professionalism with it. But this is a bad thing, because, as I said the other day, if you're going to get to the top of the armed forces, you've got to be a yes person. Whatever comes up, you've got to say yes. And if you don't believe in it, you still got to do it. And that wasn't me.
That reminds me of
BBC, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we are, but the BBC is the civil service broadcasting arm of the government, isn't it? And it's exactly the same in the BBC. And the more you say yes, the more you get on, the more you question, doesn't go so well.
Yeah. You've got to fit in. And that expression that you have to fit in was one of the things they told you. When you got to a particular, we'll say mid-rank in the military, they run these courses, which they call staff courses. And the aim of that is to prepare you to do a job in the Ministry of Defence. So instead of being at sea in a ship, you're going to go to work for the Navy in the Ministry of Defence in London. And you were given a course, taught certain things, but also expected to get through that course. And an important component was that you would be deemed to fit in with the world that you were going to go to. So politics was going to rear its head. You were going to grovel to the politicians. This is also something I was never very good at. That an MP might choose to come on board a ship, and you'd see all these grown men suddenly, it was like the Queen was coming, when in fact it was only the local MP. See, I was wrong. I now can look back and say there were certain things in my head that was wrong, but I wasn't going to be one of the person grovelling to the MP. So I probably wouldn't have fitted in.
Even then, you see that your perception was, there's something wrong with this picture, this isn't sitting right with me. Even when you were in it. And it's funny, all the time I was in the BBC, and I did love my career to a point, but I think my ego loved the career. I was firmly in my ego until I had my awakening. So I was very inured to the system like you, but I still was like, I don't know, I don't feel I kind of gel here. And even though I did well, and I had loads of friends until what happened, and went to weddings and holidays with people and everything, but it just didn't quite feel right for me. And I do remember when I left the big daily paper, and I'm not giving away anything here at all about the BBC that I shouldn't, but I gave up a staff job at a big daily paper to go and work for the BBC. And they gave me a 6-month contract. And I said, well, hang on a minute, I just left a really secure job. And they said, oh, don't take it personally, we do it to everybody. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, we need to see if you're one of us. And I was very young. I was very young then. I didn't really understand what that meant.
Yeah.
But as I progressed through the ranks, I did understand what
that absolutely is the language, isn't it? And the moment we get that, we can understand that's the reality of working in the BBC or the military. It's also there in the NHS, without any question at all. Now you're starting to be talking about how the control system really works. And so as I see it, each level you go up the pyramid, you're probably going to get more pay, you're going to get more privileges, you're going to have your ego stroked so that, I've achieved this, I'm above them and I'm well above them. And
that's what
draws you in.
Keeps you in as well. So it's a gilded cage, and I don't think it's it's by far from just the BBC or the military. It's all corporations are like that too.
Yes,
so that's
absolutely.
Corporate culture.
Yeah.
So you start at the bottom, and then they wriggle out who will make good management, and by seducing them and giving them more perks.
Yeah.
And it's a trap that everybody is in, because we're all conditioned to live our lives until you have some kind of awakening of whatever your awakening is. Your life goes down the road of, how will this make me look and what will other people think of me? And we're conditioned right from school to think in that vein. How will I look to other people? How is this making me look? How is it affecting my ego?
Yeah.
And that they program you like that because they know they can run society for the corporate benefits, for the elite benefits. If we're all programmed in that paradigm, nobody wants to step out of it.
Yeah.
And it's very seductive. It's like the BBC, I was saying to somebody once, it's all very seductive while you're playing the game, You can go to all these showbiz things and meet celebrities and be backstage at this or whatever, and it's all through work. And will give you all the riches in the world, as long as you do what you're told.
Yeah.
As long as you do
that's the key bit. You've got to play the game. You've got to do as you're told. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to ask you, lockdown, COVID, matters COVID. What's your thoughts on the whole of the COVID scamdemic?
Yeah, I thought a lot of things at the time, and this is my personal view now, is that I wonder if it is a rehearsal for something else that's going to come later, maybe not in our lifetime now, but it's got the kids very primed into remembering when they were at school and they had to mask up and social distance, and because they're so young, that 4 and 5 year olds, bless them, it's gone right into their programming. If you know the expression, get a child before 7, I'll give you the person. So I wonder if it's for that. And I do think as well, it was really an experiment to see how many people were willing to have something put into their body, whatever that was at this point in history. What will it be in 40, 50 years' time with the transhumanist agenda, which is definitely very much on the way? You can see it on the Ministry of Defence's website, the Human Augmentation Project, the merging of man and machine. We're not far off that. So if you're going to merge man and machine, how are you going to do it? One way would be to put something in somebody's body. So I think it was an experiment in human consciousness and behavior, as we know from psychological nudge units and all that. That's out in the public domain now. So I think it wasn't just a one-off. That's what I think. It's going to happen again. And then how far people go next time will be seen as how far the programming was effective this time. That's my own personal thoughts. A lot of people have said, if it happens again, Jem, it's going to happen really quickly. I don't think it will, because I think there's enough people who think like us now that will no way be locked down again.
Yeah.
So I wonder
we need another generation to go.
Yeah, another generation to go. And kids will, because when you're really young and then something happens to you, it goes so deep into your psyche and consciousness that it almost becomes a part of you. And I think maybe the children is where it is really aimed at.
Yeah, this is a very interesting point, because UK column, me, has been interested in the psychological aspect for a long time. And when you see the government, I always enjoy mentioning the document, because if people haven't seen it, they've got to see it. Is the Mindspace document from 2010. That's the Cabinet Office document, which you'll find if you just search for it as mindspace.pdf. The government of its day, the Conservative government, boasting that they could change the way people thought and behaved, and the people, wouldn't know anything had been done to them. Or if they realised something had changed, they wouldn't know how it had been done. And you think that technology developed, put in use by a government full of people who are defective in their morality, thought processes, behaviour, to the point of criminality with some, they have got a psychological tool in their hand to change our behaviour. And that tool is out there. So to me, I can agree with that basically the lockdown was conditioning. And who have you really got? The young minds.
Definitely. And also those young minds are now wedded to technology. So they've got the double whammy of having that very deep programming of I remember this, social distancing, temperatures, masks. I remember all this. That's fine. Oh, another injection. Yeah, my mum and dad had those. That's all fine. And this, where's that going? Where's that all gonna go? I mean, I do truly believe it will
it
happen
goes to
again.
control. There's only one way, one reason that it's been done is for people in power to control the rest of us. And I had a chat with a gentleman this morning, which was all about the banking system and the power of the banks, largely based in Switzerland. But even in that discussion on banks and money and the power of the banks, what did he get onto? The use of language in order to confuse people as to what was happening, and also the use of language to downplay criminality from the banks. And one of the things he raised was that if you had the media or the big papers talking about fraud and corruption in the banks, the financial ombudsman, the financial regulators, that's the word I'm looking for, would be saying that basically, no, this was just a little bit of maladministration in the bank. It was criminal, but by the time it gets reported, you change the language, which takes the heat out of it. So that was completely different subject, but discussion, but it was getting onto the same subject, which is applied psychology.
Yeah.
And the BBC's a master at it, I've got to say.
Oh, yeah. And it's all it's production values, I think. When you give this very sleek package and it's wrapped up in decades of broadcasting history and the music that is played and the titles of news shows, it's a production. It's entertainment.
It's a show.
It's a show. Yeah.
Even when it's news, it's a show.
Oh, it's always entertainment. It's always it's the black box in the corner of the room that you put on because you're bored and you want some distraction and you want to be entertained. And the news is very much a form of entertainment because it generates the reaction in the viewer. You get a charge from it, whether the story's good or bad, or you get this charge, you get this reaction, and that is show business. People go to be entertained and have a reaction.
Yeah, true, absolutely true. And the other thing that I believe that the BBC has done is that it's introduced a lot of depressing programming. So whether it's EastEnders or it's any other drama that the BBC's put on, that drama is always unbelievably dark. A psychologist told me on one occasion that one of the tricks to really make an impact on people is that you take them on a roller coaster ride through the film or whatever it is they're watching. So it might start out neutral and then it goes into something very sad and then there's something a bit happy and then somebody's died. And so it does all of this and it ends on a neutral level or a negative level. And the man said to me that when you've been subjected to this, the problem is your brain doesn't know where to store it. It doesn't know whether to take it and put it into a happy box or to put it into a sad box. And so the material that you've watched tends to hang around in your mind for some time until your brain settles it. And of course, if you watch one program and then you're on to nice, happy things in a normal life, it's not a problem. But if you're being subjected to that all the time, I remember him talking to me about that and I found it fascinating. He actually was one of the psychologists that started to help me understand what neuro-linguistic programming really was. And he was the person who said, well, my goodness, this stuff is very powerful. And I then said to him, so what happens when a criminal can use it? What happens when a child abuser can use NLP? And he went quite pale, actually, and said, well, they could abuse the child and the child wouldn't remember. And I'm mentioning children now in that light, but actually I think the BBC regards the UK public as a childlike audience.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. I think this is my personal point of view, having worked there, maybe not directly in a regional newsroom, you're quite close to your audience, so there is a better relationship. But I think as a national broadcaster, it holds the audience in something akin to contempt, actually.
Yeah.
It's we're
all CB, what is it?
CBBS?
CBBS.
Yeah, I think it really, even now, we sit here today and there's it still won't be transparent on a presenter that's alleged to have done something far worse than I did, but was allowed to stay in their role because we weren't quite sure what was going on. I wasn't allowed to stay in my role. I was frog marched out 30 minutes after they found out what I'd apparently done that was so awful, which was have an opinion. But the public, the licence payers, are quite rightly demanding answers and an inquiry. And the BBC's, again, been slow to act. I think it thinks nobody's looking. I think it thinks if we just get on with being the BBC, then nobody will question us. Is
it that, or is it absolute arrogance that they don't really see why they should bother with anything the public thinks? That this machine, this juggernaut, is chugging on, and it's absolutely arrogant. And, well, the public's a bit upset, but we'll just carry on doing it.
We'll just carry on, and hopefully they'll all go away, which people are definitely not going to do now. Yeah, I think there is that as well, and the BBC's is always been very cloistered, and its policy is always to say nothing. But, I mean, its track record over the last, 12 months, it gave Philip Schofield a platform, which you could argue you need some sensitivity to the person Philip Schofield was allegedly involved with. That person needs to be thought of too. And he was accused of some very serious things, but let's give him a platform. Why would you do that? Actually, it's quite tasteless. And obviously, then you had the whole Gary Lineker thing, which blew up. And again, the BBC, it's consistently getting it wrong now, and it's not learning from people who are approaching it and saying you're not doing it right. And it's sort of going la la la. We'll just carry on being the BBC.
Well, are they getting it wrong or convoluted? But are they getting it wrong, or what appears wrong to us is actually what they want to do? They want to cause confusion. They want to cause angst. They want to cause a disgruntled public. This is all winding the public up and leading them into no man's land.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's that clever. I don't know. It's a very good point. I don't think they're deliberately. It's an institution. I don't think it's deliberately doing that. I just think it's such an institutionalized way of operating that I don't know if it knows how to change.
Anecdotal story in response to that. And many years ago, I was sat with a family member in a very nice sunny garden in London, and we breakfast in the garden, little tiny back garden. And the particular individual had had a career in the NHS, and they'd recently changed job. And I said, "How's the new job going?" And they said, with a pause, "Well, I don't know. I think it's frying pan and fire, because I'm in the new location. There's a lot of good things, but we have meetings and planning meetings and strategy meetings, and suggestions are made for new ideas, which are clearly nonsense. And all the professional people say, yeah, but if we do that, we're going to have problems. This is going to happen." And then they do it. And then all of the old time staff are faced with an increased workload to sort it all out. It's just madness. It's bad management. And I said, well, what if it's not bad management? What if it's good management? And the person looked at me as though I was a complete idiot, which is fine. And then it went quiet. And then they said, oh my God, that explains that, and it explains that, and it explains that. And all I was really doing was saying, and it's an assumption we all make, that every organisation, we could say the government, we could say BBC, we could say the NHS, the police, yes, they're really working for the right things. But that's an assumption. And it's a very naive assumption, because we don't even know who runs these organisations. But if you look at what's happening in the world, we're seeing increased breakdown everywhere. The police don't work properly. They're thuggish, they're stupid, they're applying forces in the wrong way. The government can't really run the country. The NHS is breaking down. Is this just accident, or is somebody driving it? And I'm going to say, I've come to the conclusion that if it's happening in a whole different if it's happening in different sectors of society at the same time, the chances of it being an accident in each one of those are pretty slim.
There is, absolutely, that's a very valid point. And there's something else I want to bring in, which is that this moment in human consciousness and evolution has been prophesized in so many different religions and mythologies. And a great friend, Thomas Sheridan, he's a friend of mine and I know he's a great friend of yours. He's talked about how this is on the Kali Yugas and it's the ending of a cycle. And actually, is it all these kind of control structures breaking down? They're breaking down and being shown to be what they really are for the first time. And people are also, because of that perception shift that we talked about earlier, people are seeing it. They're seeing that these structures which we thought were there to protect us and to help us are anything but. It's the actual opposite.
Yeah.
But is it because there's something more at work than just the crumbling of old facades and institutions and corruption being revealed? That there's actually I believe, and I'm sure many people, because I talk to people about this kind of thing, there is a spiritual side to this. It's not just political, socioeconomic. There's something changing in the world. It's what comes to replace it, though. This is where we've got to be careful. What comes to replace it? One big world government, which says, we'll sort everything out, or us. We say, we'll sort everything out. This is the crossroads, I believe.
I certainly agree that there's something spiritual happening, and it's happening at the same time as all these major political events and events in society. And I can say that over the years, particularly when I've been involved in a public event, so public speaking or one of the AVs, inevitably, when people get the opportunity to talk to you, there may be other people around, so it's not private, but small groups of people. The group will always have somebody who say, do you think this is all politics or do you think there's more to it? And I would always say it's a spiritual battle. And off stage, you find you could really engage with people. I'll go back some years. You could engage with that small group and you could have a very interesting discussion about what that meant. But I would say to them that whatever you think is going on, there's a spiritual battle. The thing that's happening now is you can engage with an audience on this topic from the stage. And this means that in the audience, there's a lot more people that sense that there's something else going on. They don't know what it is, they just sense something's happening and they're hungry to find out more. So if you say to them, it's spiritual, then the questions start, what do you mean? And what I found, and I think it's a really encouraging thing, is you find that people will then start opening up and they will give you their own thoughts and they will tell you of their own experiences. And it's amazing how many people have had pretty extraordinary experiences, as you've said, which have then led them to say, hang on, things aren't quite as I thought. So, yeah, I think there's something deeper. And I'm going to add to that, because I come in from a Christian point of view, that if you go and explore that, the key bit about it is that the prognosis for where we get to is a very nice thing. It's a loving, caring thing, as opposed to the sort of end of the world scenario that some people are drawn into, where it's all dark and it doesn't matter what we're going to do, this monster's going to appear. So I'm more with you. I don't come at it from a Christian standpoint, but I definitely believe in a higher force. But I think there's an element of both in here. You have to get rid of the old before you can make way for the new. And so sometimes it's darkest before the dawn, isn't it? You're right, a good expression.
We're right on that, that kind of, this is where it's going to go. We're at the top of the roller coaster now, and it's like, and we're up here, and then boom, and then I'm with you though. I'm quietly confident that this energetic shift that's happening to so many people and leading people to see the world in a different way is a positive thing. But I do wonder if consciousness or God or whatever you prefer to call it is on the run a little bit, because it knows that there is this dark energy trying to kind of, I think, destroy it. This is the technocratic agenda, I think, and the transhuman agenda of merging humans with machines. It's to get the bit that they can't have, the soul, the spirit, the spark. That's what it wants. And if it could succeed, but then that is up to us. It is up to us. And I'm so buoyed by the amount of people now that, lots of people 2-3 years ago, nearly now, when I was in the papers all the time and my reputation was tarnished and I did lose friends. People thought I was a nutter.
You should wear this as a badge of honour.
I do now. At the time, it was awful. It was awful. My whole life as I'd known it was just in tatters. And I thought, oh, God, and people, oh, you're a nutter. You're one of them. And now people are like, oh, Jem, can I talk to you about this digital petition I want to sign? And I'm like, yes, you can, and people are, so it's someone's got to go first, haven't they? And then you've been going first a lot longer than me and taking the flak. And
yeah, but even I've got to say, in the earliest days for me, there were people who'd been doing amazing work in the background for years. And of course, the big difference for them is there was no internet. And so how were you going to find out about these people? You might find a little book or a booklet to read, or you might hear through the grapevine that there was somebody somewhere doing all this amazing research. It's the internet, isn't it? That much as I hate it, that's made the information exchange explode, and we now know who's out there. But yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be down because you've left the beast.
I left the beast. Yeah.
we got some other places to go, but I've got to ask this question, which you might not want to answer. But what's your feeling about young Mariana Spring?
I knew you were gonna. To me, she is the typical BBC ideal employee. Oxbridge educated, so very, very well programmed to be, the system personified. If you go to any of those Oxbridge universities, you're taught how to debate, you're taught how to, steer an argument and where you want to steer it. You're being primed for a position of power, aren't you? But she reminds me of a lot of people that I work with, that I witnessed at the BBC. And they're kind of this kind of person, pick me, I'm ever so good. Really, I'm ever so good, and male and female, and really conscientious and really hardworking. And I really want to make my mark in the world. And I really believe she's so in the system, and she completely believes what she's doing. I think she's completely brainwashed. She completely thinks that however she steers an argument. I mean, recent example is of course lovely Darren at the Light Paper, who made that masterstroke of filming his entire 3-hour interview with Mariana Spring and uploading it. And you can see there's a huge amount of intelligent debate and discussion in that interview, but she wants to go for that one tiny sliver of a fact that she
Which is not right, is it? Just at a basic principle, it's not right.
No, she
it's
can
not
go for
fair,
the chink in the argument, that they may or may not have an affiliation. He may have spoken to someone once on a train platform somewhere, and that's enough. That's enough to make that link and make a story. So that's not journalism either. But I genuinely believe she thinks she's doing a public service. And I think that still applies to a lot of people in these public institutions, including the BBC, is that they haven't had their perception shift yet. And the best you can hope for with lovely Mariana is one day she has her prison moment, her yoga moment, moment, and she thinks, oh my God, my whole life's been a lie. I'm really sorry, everybody. Yeah. Now let's all manifest that. Let's all hope Mariana has her moment where her soul kicks in and her ego goes down and she's like, oh my God, I've got it all wrong. She has her red pill moment.
Yeah. For a lot of people, unfortunately, or if their ego's way up, it's when they get into a bad situation, something happens that's not very nice in their life, and that has the impact on them, and then it changes. But she's been very shy because she's had several invites to communicate with the UK column, but she never wants to, which I think is very disappointing.
Yeah. Why? Come on, Mariana.
Why?
Brian's lovely.
Why?
Have the conversation.
I think there's, actually we know a little bit of this story. A certain gentleman, quite a few years ago, 5 years ago about that, was invited into the BBC to talk about his particular story, and that was, I'm not going to mention a name, but the background was an ex-policeman who was exposing a lot of stuff happening with the Metropolitan Police. He was treated very badly by the Met, but he got an invite in to talk to one of the BBC editorial reporting teams. You'll know the terminology better than I did, because they were encouraging him to think they were going to do a documentary on what had happened to him. He spent nearly 6 hours in the BBC talking to them about this and also other things. And I'd done an interview with him, and this was mentioned in front of the BBC team. And I'm allowed to say that they said to him, we thought it was a very professional interview. And that led on to the fact that BBC team, with a reasonably senior manager, were prepared to say, we watched the UK column.
Wow.
Right? So he said this was a very interesting experience to be in the belly of the beast, and they were saying we watched the UK. So I think that they watch the UK column, but poor old Marianne has been told, no, don't go near the column.
But I'm quite surprised they haven't come after you, actually, because the Conspiracy Land documentary is so it does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? It's going after people that it perceives are far-right conspiracy theorists. Well, there's a hell of a lot of far-right conspiracy theorists in the UK then at the moment, if that's your take on things. But I'm surprised. And I would think it would be the obvious, because you've been going
There's no such thing as
time.
bad publicity, you see. So we think to ourselves, yep, let's get UK column on the BBC. The Times had a go at a hit piece on us after the big lockdown protest in London. And that was a pretty appalling article, because there was a lot of stuff that was factually just incorrect. Then the smear technique was in there. So my picture was put juxtaposed with somebody else that I'd never met, but the inference from the article was that we knew each other. And it was just an appalling article. So we did challenge the Times a little bit, and they backed off, and they haven't come near us again. But what would really make me laugh is that Mariana Spring did a hit piece and used a lot of the false information that the Times put out. That would be really quite enjoyable. And
Wow.
what part of the report, keep it light-hearted, part of the report was that I had written several theological books, which of course I haven't. But when I read it, I instantly knew where that little report came from, because if you just put Brian Gerrish into Google, that word you mustn't use, one of the people who comes up with that name is a lay preacher in America who's quite famous for the books he's written, but he's called Brian Gerrish. So the media this side of the pond couldn't even work out that was some poor American chap who's now been smeared by being called Brian Gerrish a la England. And
Basic journalism.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
Wow.
Well, okay, so so your view on Mariana is that she's not all bad. There will be people who are shocked.
The people will be going, how can you say that? Yeah, I don't. I because I was in it. I worked with people, and because of the people that went to the tabloids because I'd gone to anti-lockdown marches. These were people I'd worked with for 20 years. I never really found out who it was. I got my suspicions, but they in a heartbeat they galvanized against me. It wasn't everyone by a long way. I had a lot of support from people at work, but they genuinely believed that they were right, basically being a grass and going and instead of fronting me up face to face and going, Jem, what are you doing? And I could have a conversation. It was like, let's go to the tabloids and ruin her. But there were several people in the very same newsroom that went to Black Lives Matter in Bristol, the big one, where the statue came down and everything. And that was a huge protest. And they went to that at a time of lockdown. And as BBC members of staff aren't supposed to go to protest. But that was completely overlooked, because that's an okay protest.
That was the right protest.
Because it's this mindset. And I wouldn't have said that anyone I used to work with, even the person that went to the tabloids about me, was a bad person. I just genuinely believe they're so ingrained in seeing the world a certain way that you can't step away from the narrative without being some enemy. So what I don't want to do is say to Mariana Spring that she's an other, she's an enemy, because she's down her little rabbit hole and I'm down mine. But if I met her, I wouldn't be antagonistic.
No, it would be better to try and convert.
It's better to be just like, hi, how you doing? You all right? We can have a difference of opinion and we can actually still be best friends if you want. I don't want to be best friends with Mariana Spring, but I would have said to the person who went to the tabloids about me, because that was quite a vicious thing to do about your workmates. No one likes the grass. I would have said, can we not just have, we've had difference of opinion about Brexit in the newsroom, we've had differences of opinion about Trump, and we'd all have big heated debates. We're journalists, we're not shy of tiring wallflowers. But then everyone would have a big debate and a row, and then we'd all have a drink and go to the bar after work and still be mates. Yeah. Not with this. This is where it's a paradigm shift, isn't it? And it's
and also I'm wondering whether does Mariana Spring think for herself? I'm going to use this word deliberately, or has she been reframed to think in a particular mindset? I mean, what training has she been put through, and has she been given enough of these courses in various subjects so that actually she's working to an implanted mindset? And If people listening to this think this is a bit wacky, the first time I ever came across this stuff going on was a lady contacted me, and I was talking about common purpose a lot at the time. She contacted me because she watched one of the talks that I'd given, and her story was that she was married to a policeman. The policeman went on several courses, and she said, my husband changed. He would get very aggressive. He might be watching the TV and perhaps there's a protest going on, and he'd be shouting at the TV, you see those effing, these are the people we got to deal with. And she said at a particular point, they went on holiday together for a week, somewhere down by the sea. And she said, by the Wednesday, I knew I had to leave him. Right? And she said, but that's only the start of the story, because when it got this bad, I started to speak to some of, she said, our friends, to see if I could understand what had gone on. And she spoke to her friend who was a black policeman, and she started to ask him about the courses. And what were the courses they were doing at the time? They were called diversity courses. And the black policeman, when she said to the black guy, what did you do in these courses? He said, well, if I didn't know I was effing black then, I do now. And she said, what do you mean? And he said, well, they would say, you're on duty in the station and a black person walks in or a Sikh walks in, and how do you treat them? And we were all very surprised at this, because we'd treat them like we'd treat anybody else. We'd ask them the same questions. But they keep needling at you until you'd admit that maybe you might do something slightly different. And what was actually going on was that in the course, they were planting little seeds in the mind of the policeman. And this black policeman could work out that in his station, at least, there hadn't been a problem. But by the time the diversity training was over, there were little thoughts, well, maybe somebody has done that or said that to me because it's discrimination. Whereas before it was, I'll say lads together, because it was probably mainly blokes. And this was part of the little story that led me through to the man talking about NLP. And when you then see the government boasting that these techniques can be used. Now, is the BBC clear of all this stuff? I don't think so. I think inside the BBC, they're going to have their own behavioural insights team.
Yes, yeah.
And that will be tied in with the material produced for the audience.
I mean, where I was so low level. I never got beyond the rank of broadcast journalist. I didn't want to progress because I wanted to have a nice life. Basically, I didn't want the stress of more responsibility. But there are lots of unspoken rules, aren't there, in any culture? And so, like, for example, in our newsroom, there was an unspoken rule that lunch break was at this time. Now, that was never set down in stone. But, we all trooped off at a certain time. We all came back at a certain time. And if you took your break around different parameters, you're somehow odd. So it was almost like you're programming yourself, through the values of the culture. So as you progress further up, there would have been more behavioural codes. And before you know it, that you are being programmed neurolinguistically without anyone having to take you into a dark room and going, right, this is what you've got to do.
Yeah, it's sort of drip. It's nudge, isn't it?
It's very nudge. It's nudge, and it's subtle, but it's not that subtle either. So, yes, I think it's done institutionally. It's done institutionally, these codes of behaviour and these codes of thinking.
Yeah.
Very subtle, but very effective. Very effective.
And you can get large groups of people with it. This is where it gets interesting. So when I delved into this, the NLP trained people said, if you were, say you were teaching a class, you got 30 people in the class, then the effect you could get would be a bell curve. So some of the people you don't get, you just doesn't work with them. But the majority of that group of people it will affect strongly. And then there'll be a group that are affected a little bit. And then the man said something creepy to me. He said, just think that you have a new laptop and and the thing's great and it works really fast. And then you decide you'll have this little screensaver, and that's a nice game. And you add these little bits on, and then after a while, your laptop is starting to freeze or hang up. And he said the danger with this stuff is that you get one little dose of NLP, and then maybe a month later you're getting another course and getting another dose from a different trainer who might be NLP trained themselves, so they're not even a normal person. And he said, what you've got is an accumulative build-up. And I found that really creepy.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like I say, I was a lowly level broadcast journalist, and I never progressed up the ranks. So I never really got to go on all these courses. I know plenty of people at the BBC did go on Common Purpose, and that's quite a well-known fact.
We got the admission at whatever year it was as to how many £100,000 had been spent on BBC Common Purpose training.
So there you go, and that's in the public domain. So yeah, it wouldn't, that there are a lot of training courses. The further up the ladder you go, there's management training courses. So I wasn't privy to any of what went on in those courses at all. But I did see the institutional programming. So that's very much a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah.
But I think again that's in all organisations, really.
I think so too, because it sort of spread its way through. A little bit of clock watching going on now. What have you been up to recently? Because you've had this change of heart. World Health Council.
World Council for Health.
World Council for Health.
Council for Health, based in Bath, in the West Country, which is where I'm from. I mean, again, I'm very incredibly lucky that through a series of synchronicities and coincidences and all the things you think, it's just chance. I don't believe anything of that. I think it was definitely a guiding force. So I'm now working for them. I have been for the last nearly 6 months now, doing press and PR and presenting on their weekly live streams. And it's just such a joy to be working with people. And again, it just shows how we're galvanizing in numbers, because everybody at the World Council for Health, which was formed in only September 2021 as a reaction to everything that had gone on. Dr. Tess Laurie, one of the great co-founders, she really has got a vision and she's making it work. And the organization is very effective, challenging health policies around the world. But everybody working there has a story about being basically effectively kicked out of their old life. So our secretary is an ex-medical secretary from the NHS. We've got amazing project manager. We've got a great woman, and she was working for Virgin and wouldn't have the thing. And so she's now on a different path. So everyone, so for me, so long when I'm walking away from my entire life, and I thought, God, what have I done? It's just me. No way. There's loads of people that are quietly exiting the matrix, panicking for a bit, thinking, what have I done? And then suddenly your new friends and family are all over here.
Yeah, and they're better people. That's one of the key things that I've found is that I've never been short in my life. I've never been short of friends, but I know the quality of the friends that I have now are heaps better than the people I regarded as friends. Because when times get tough, you suddenly find that all your friends go whoosh. Isn't that how it works?
It can, yeah. I mean, certainly I've still got a few good friends from my old life, thankfully, and they're great people. But I have made more friends in the last 3 years, as I'm sure lots of people have. You suddenly made all these new friends and you're thinking, how did I not know you were there before? And I'm seeing it on a local level socially, that around near where I live, there's a little speakeasy that's sprung up, and people are getting together and putting on events under the radar, and it's nearby a farm where I live, and I was thinking, there are hundreds of people in my sleepy little county of North Somerset that think like me, and I didn't even know they were there all those years ago when I was waking up. So yeah, I'm working somewhere where the structure of the organisation isn't corporate, it isn't pyramidal, it's very much you work with the World Council for Health. So it's really collaborative, and I think is a model for how businesses and organisations will be structured in the future. It's an in-the-round community interest company, so we all have a say in what we do and how it works and how we work together.
And a lot of professional people being drawn in, and you've done all the conferences and things.
Yeah, we recently did the Better Way conference in Bath in June, which was a resounding success, and we had doctors and health professionals and campaigners from all over the world. You can still see it online if you want to get a virtual ticket, but everyone's saying how refreshing it was, and I really believe, we're talking about creating the new. That's a model that can really, really work, and World Council for Health has now got partners in over 200 different countries
Yeah.
and affiliates all around the world.
And it started one couple of people deciding, no, they're not going to have it. We're going to do something.
Yeah.
And it's made a difference.
Yeah, massively so, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say, Gemma, it's been brilliant talking to you. I know we could go on because there's a lot to talk about. I come back to the blue sky that we've got behind us. My goodness, that looks, well, this is a special edition because look what's coming through. We've got the ferry coming into the,
wow.
There we are. So there's a lot of happy people come from France or Spain. I don't know whether that one will have appeared from. But just at the close of our wonderful discussion together, we've got a special ship in the background. We've got blue sky. You've got a very sunny jacket on. So my little challenge to you is you've got the UK column audience out there. Give them what you think is the good news at the moment, what you think is going well. What?
Well, I think it's all going well. I think the fact that you're watching UK column has grown hugely over the last 2.5, 3 years as a result of what's been going on. We've had things like, I mean, my hat is, I have a media hat on, so we've seen things like the light paper come as a result of what's happening. Alternative media is springing up now all around the world at an exponential rate as people strive to get information out and question what's going on. And I think just if we stay, I know it's a cliche, but we have to stay high vibration because there's so much information around that can make you go, oh no, the world's an awful place still and the globalists are going to win. Only if you think that. We are what we consume, so consume the good stuff and focus on what you want to manifest. And I know it sounds a bit hippie and woo-woo and out there, but actually for me, for the last 2-3 years of trauma, you've got to stay positive. And I've stayed positive. I walked away from my whole life, left it in the ashes, and now I've never been happier.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. I think that's a lovely place to end on. So Jemma, thank you very much for coming into the UK column studio. It's been really fascinating talking to you, and I hope you'll come and see us again.
No, I'd love to, and thank you for having me. It's been a massive honour.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much to all the UK column viewers for joining us, and we'll be back another time. Thank you. Bye-bye.